is currently underway in Gandhinagar, Gujarat. Also referred to as COP13, the conference was inaugurated by Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Monday via video conferencing. The inaugural day of COP13 also saw India officially taking over its presidency for the next 3 years until 2023. Representatives from 129 parties, eminent conservationists, as well as international NGOs working in the field of wildlife conservation are participating in the Conference of Parties, which is the decision-making organ of the Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species or Wild Animals, also called CMS. As an environmental treaty of the United Nations, CMS provides a global platform for the conservation and sustainable use of migratory animals and also their habitats. In fact, it is the only convention that deals with taking or harvesting of species from the wild. So on this edition of In Depth, we analyze the importance of CMS for India and the government's commitment towards conservation of migratory species. We'll also talk about the various initiatives listed by Prime Minister Narendra Modi for the conservation of wildlife and increase in forest cover in the country. The theme of COP13 is Migratory Species Connect the Planet and we welcome them home. Its logo is inspired by kolam, a traditional art form from southern India, which has been used to depict key migratory species in India like the Amur falcon, humpback whale and also marine turtles. The mascot for CMS COP13 is the Great Indian Bustard, a critically endangered species which has been accorded the highest protection status under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. The inaugural speech at COP13 was delivered by Prime Minister Narendra Modi via video conference. So let's listen in to what the Prime Minister said on India's commitment towards conservation of migratory species. India playing host to a UN Biodiversity Summit for the first time. With 2.4% of the world's land area, India contributes 8% of the known global biodiversity. It is also a temporary home to around 500 species of migratory birds from across the globe. Species that have been the symbol of conservation of wildlife and their habitats. Inaugurating the 13th Conference of Parties on Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals at Gandhinagar through video conferencing, Prime Minister Narendra Modi called India one of the most diverse countries of the world.
Our Vedas spoke of protection of animals. Emperor Ashoka put great emphasis on preventing the destruction of forests and the killing of animals. Inspired by Gandhiji, the ethos of non-violence and protection of animals and nature has been suitably enshrined in the Constitution of India. It also finds reflection in several laws and legislations.
Mentioning the increase in India's forest cover, which currently stands at 21.67% of the total geographical area of the country, the Prime Minister stressed how India has been championing the cause of climate action through conservation, sustainable lifestyle and green development model.
The range of our initiatives include ambitious target of 450 megawatt in renewable energy, push towards electric vehicles, smart cities, conservation of water. The International Solar Alliance, the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, and Industry's Transition Leadership with Sweden have seen encouraging participation from wide array of countries. India is one of the few countries whose actions are compliant with the Paris Agreement goal of keeping rise in temperature to below 2 degrees Celsius.
Noting that India is a part of the Central Asian flyway for migratory birds, the Prime Minister said that with a view to conserve birds along the Central Asian flyway and their habitats, India has prepared a national action plan. Besides an institutional mechanism for undertaking research, studies, assessments, capacity development and conservation initiatives through a common platform is also in the works.
India has about 7,500 kilometers coastline, and Indian marine waters are rich in biodiversity with innumerable species. India proposed to strengthen its association with the ASEAN and East Asia Summit countries. This would be in sync with the Indo-Pacific Ocean initiatives, wherein India will be playing a leadership role. India by 2020 will be launching its marine turtle policy and marine standing management policy. This will also address the pollution caused by microplastics. Single-use plastics have been a challenge for environment protection, and we in India have been on a mission mode to reduce its usage.
Prime Minister Modi also gave an account of how focused species conservation programs are showing encouraging results. The number of tiger reserves has increased from 9 since its formative years to 50 at present. India today also has the distinction of having a population of almost 2,970 tigers. The country has achieved its target of doubling the number of tigers 2 years before the committed date of 2022. India is also supporting more than 60% of global Asian elephant population. 30 elephant reserves have been identified by states. Further, Project Snow Leopard has been launched to protect the snow leopard and its habitat in the upper Himalayas. India recently hosted the steering committee of the Global Snow Leopard Ecosystem Program of 12 countries that resulted in the New Delhi Declaration envisaging development of country-specific framework and cooperation between countries for snow leopard conservation. India is also taking a leadership role in promoting green economy, including conservation of mountain ecology with people's participation. The Prime Minister also reiterated his government's commitment to the path of sustainable development, with people being made important stakeholders in the task of preserving the natural resources for our future generations. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. The Conference of Parties of the Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals highlights the need for international action to protect migratory species across the planet. In our next report, let's discuss the 13th edition of Conference of Parties, its agenda and also India's role in it.
The 13th Conference of Parties of the Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species of Wild Animals is an environmental treaty under the aegis of United Nations Environment Programme. This edition has been slated as the Super Year for Biodiversity. The theme of CMS COP13 in India is Migratory Species Connect the Planet and We Welcome Them Home. The COP13 theme highlights the importance of ecological connectivity to better protect migratory wildlife and their habitats. The loss and fragmentation of habitat are key threats to the migratory animals across the world. They are also considered the biggest threats to biodiversity worldwide, with climate change aggravating these effects. Ecological connectivity is the unimpeded movement of species and the flow of natural processes that sustain life on Earth. The CMS has called for the concept of connectivity to be integrated into the new global biodiversity framework that will be adopted at the end of next year in China.
The basic agenda is to conserve the migratory species of the birds. The basic agenda is to see the habitat of all of these type of migratory species and which are the areas which goes on to create problem for these type of migratory species. And also, which are the known species which require to be conserved in this case. At the same time, while it is being talked about, what can go on to be the degree of a cooperation between different type of countries, which will go on to help this type of a conservation that requires a trans-frontier contact. And not only that, the type of a technology and the identification of new type of issues and problems, which will go on to help us understand the issue better and go on to solve it better as well.
The CMS COP13 logo is inspired by kolam, a traditional art form from southern India. In the logo of CMS COP13, kolam art form is used to depict key migratory species in India like armor falcon, humpback whale and marine turtles. The mascot for CMS COP13 is Gibi, the Great Indian Bustard. It is a critically endangered species that has been accorded the highest protection status under the Wildlife Protection Act 1972.
Migrating species is a most fascinating topic, and we have whale shark, humpback whale, Great Indian Bustard, turtles, dugong, and many other migratory species also coming from various planets. My only point which I want to make is, we must ensure people's participation in conservation. Planet can be saved only by having people participating in it voluntarily.
The week-long meeting will consider proposals to include 10 new species for protection under CMS. The species being considered include the Asian elephant, jaguar and the Great Indian Bustard and smooth hammerhead shark. It will consider new plans for the protection of 14 species. Given the global focus on moving away from fossil fuel sources of energy to renewable sources, the potential of renewable energy installations and related power line infrastructure to adversely impact migratory birds and bats will also be discussed at the meet. It will consider the work of the CMS Energy Task Force set up in 2015 to reconciling renewable energy developments with conservation of migratory species. The meeting will consider a pathway for integrating biodiversity and migratory species considerations into national energy and climate policy. For the first time, the topic of light pollution will be on the agenda of the COP, as artificial light, which is increasing worldwide, is affecting migratory species such as birds, bats and marine turtles. Decline in insects is another new topic on the agenda of the convention. The convention will encourage parties to conduct further research on the impact of plastic pollution on freshwater and terrestrial CMS-listed species in support of internationally agreed policy. As the host, India shall be designated president for the next 3 years. The Government of India is signatory to the Convention on Conservation of Migratory Wild Animals since 1983. The Government of India has been taking necessary actions to protect and conserve migratory marine species. The Indian subcontinent is also part of the major bird flyway network, the Central Asian Flyway, that covers areas between the Arctic and the Indian Oceans and covers at least 279 populations of 182 migratory water bird species, including 29 globally threatened species. With inputs from Vipul Agarwal, Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Time for a short break here. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.
The type of difference is there between India and China. Do you think that BRICS future is well?
I'm completely convinced there is a bright future for BRICS.
Once India and Pakistan have joined SCO, do you think that SCO may also be impacted the way SARC was impacted?
The experience of India's membership and Pakistan's membership in SCO is successful, sir. This is a structure whose authority is growing.
India and Russia being very close, very special privileged partners, do you have any understanding about Indo-Pacific?
Yes, we are suspicious. We are suspicious about that. How to manage this situation is precisely a matter of dialogue.
Watch Indian Standard Time. Exclusive interview with Russian Ambassador Nikolai Kudashev. Tuesday 10 p.m. and Wednesday 10 a.m. Only on Rajya Sabha Television.
Welcome back. You're watching In Depth. The Convention on the Conservation of Migratory Species is an environmental treaty of the United Nations for the conservation and sustainable use of migratory animals and their habitats. The convention lists migratory species that are threatened with extinction. The member countries are obligated to protect the listed species throughout their range. So let's talk about this CMS list in greater detail.
Migratory species move from one habitat to another at different times of the year due to factors like food, sunlight, temperature, climate, etc. The movement between habitats sometimes exceeds thousands of kilometers for birds and mammals. A migratory route can involve nesting and also requires several suitable habitats. The Convention on Conservation of Migratory Species, or CMS, is an attempt to ensure that the migratory species get habitats. It is also called the Bonn Convention, from the place it was signed in 1983. It has 129 member states. CMS establishes obligations for all members and promotes concerted action among states to conserve endangered migratory species. The convention complements a number of other international organizations, NGOs, and partners in the media as well as in the corporate sector. The convention recognizes that wild animals, in their innumerable forms, are an irreplaceable part of the Earth's natural system and must be conserved. Each generation has an obligation to ensure that this legacy is conserved and wisely used. The convention is concerned particularly with those species of wild animals that migrate across or outside national jurisdiction boundaries. The convention says that states must be the protectors of the migratory species of wild animals that live within or pass through their national jurisdiction boundaries.
Migratory species go on to hatch in one place. They go on to take birth in one place. They go on to find food in another place. They go on to die in another place. Now, in the course of it, most of these migratory species go on to traverse a series of something like some 6,000, 7,000 kilometers, and they're going to fly. For example, if you can go on to pick up someone like Arctic tern, now that species of bird that goes on to originate from the northern Canadian region, and that goes on to pass through all the way to Rockies Mountains and then to Andes Mountains, goes on to Antarctic, and then it goes on to return back to it. Now, in the process, they keep on flying, they keep on looking for food, that is number one. Second is that they require a navigation, and for the purpose of navigation, they require the magnetic field of the Earth to be guiding them. The third is they do going to require a good amount of information and knowledge about the weather conditions as well, which will going to help them guide and so that they can go to protect themselves. The fourth is they must go on to be having a track through which they can go on to flow and the move, and they're going to be moving in a formation, and that formation must not be disturbed at all.
The CMS and allied agreements determine policy and provide further guidance on specific issues about conservation through various action plans. At present, 173 species from the world have found protection under the convention. Migratory species that would significantly benefit from international cooperation are listed in Appendix 2 of the Convention. It includes many mammals, including land mammals, marine mammals and bats, birds, fish, reptiles, and one insect species. India has been a party of the Convention since 1983. It has also signed non-legally binding MOU with CMS on the conservation and management of Siberian cranes in 1998, marine turtles in 2007, dugongs in 2008 and raptors in 2016. India provides temporary shelter to several migratory species, including armor falcons, bar-headed geese, black-necked cranes, marine turtles, dugongs, humpbacked whales. The Indian subcontinent is also part of a significant bird flyway network, that is, the Central Asian Flyway that covers at least 279 populations of 182 migratory water bird species, including 29 globally threatened species. With inputs from Vipul Agarwal, Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
According to a study, the world's 7.8 billion human population represents only 0.01% of all living beings on the planet. Yet, since the dawn of civilization, humanity has caused the loss of over 60% of all wild mammals and half of plants, while livestock kept by humans abound. Many scientists believe the world has already begun a sixth mass extinction, the first to be caused by human beings. Our next report details the annihilation of wildlife by human activities and what the governments world over are doing to save the planet.
Humanity has wiped out over 60% of mammals, birds, fish and reptiles since 1970, leading the world's foremost experts to warn that the annihilation of wildlife is now an emergency that threatens civilization. A report by the World Wildlife Fund finds that the vast and growing consumption of food and resources by the global human population is destroying the web of life, upon which human society ultimately depends for clean air, water and most everything else. Many scientists believe the world has begun a sixth mass extinction, the first to be caused by humans. Other recent analyses have revealed that humankind has destroyed 83% of all mammals and half of plants since the dawn of civilization, and that even if the destruction were to end now, it would take 5 to 7 million years for the natural world to recover. The Living Planet Index produced for WWF by the Zoological Society of London uses data on 16,704 populations of mammals, birds, fish, reptiles and amphibians, representing more than 4,000 species, to track the decline of wildlife. It analysed that between 1970 and 2014, populations fell by an average of 60%. However, in 2010, the decline was 52%. Since then, the wildlife crash is continuing unabated.
Biggest threat to such species which are dying away, which are endangered, is man itself. We are encroaching land. There is so much urban development. The whole environment is now polluted because of industrial waste and smoke. So basically, when we are trying to step into the main habitat of these animals, we are pushing them away, and hence there is lesser migration, lesser breeding, and we are losing the species.
The Living Planet report clearly demonstrates that human activity is destroying nature at an unacceptable rate, threatening the well-being of current and future generations. The biggest cause of wildlife losses is the destruction of natural habitats, much of it to create farmland. 3/4 of all land on Earth is now significantly affected by human activities. Killing for food is the next biggest cause. 300 mammal species are being eaten into extinction, while the oceans are massively overfished, with more than half now being industrially fished. The habitats suffering the greatest damage are rivers and lakes, where wildlife populations have fallen 83% due to the enormous thirst of agriculture and large number of dams. The destruction of wild habitat for farming, logging and development has resulted in the start of what many scientists consider the sixth mass extinction of life to occur in the Earth's 4 billion year history. About half the Earth's animals are thought to have been lost in the last 50 years.
Now, one of the first effort is that they must go on to require to clear the track through which these birds go on to fly. That's number one. Second is their habitat. Habitat, that means the place where these birds go on to live. And these birds don't going to live in one place. They're going to live in thousands of places because they keep on stopping. They're going to fly for one day, stop in another place, take their food, and then they again going to go. That is going to be part of it. That means that they require a very good amount of an intercontinental cooperation, whereby they can go on to ask any country to take care of some of those type of wetlands or where the birds can go on to feed. That is going to be another issue. The third issue is going to be associated with the use of a certain type of pollutants. If a bird goes on to use a pollutant and it goes on to eat a pollutant in one of these places, it is likely to have its effect in the entire of the physiognomy. It is going to be having its effect on the young ones, on the birth of the young ones. Now they may go on to have a very high degree for pesticide concentration, and if this pesticide concentration goes on to be high in one region, and let's say if they have taken food, then another region, the moment they will go on to deposit the excreta, they will go on to deposit this strata, they will go on to pollute that region as well. So there is no country that can go on to left unaffected by all of this aspect.
To fight the massive annihilation of wildlife, Indian government has launched a National Wildlife Action Plan for the period between 2017 and 2031. The National Wildlife Action Plan consists of 17 chapters, including new action themes such as climate change and wildlife health, inland aquatic and coastal and marine conservation, human-wildlife conflict mitigation, and human-wildlife conflict mitigation. The National Wildlife Action Plan has specific chapters on people's participation in wildlife conservation to elicit involvement of people in wildlife conservation. The plan also provides for priority projects including setting up electronic eye, that is EI, surveillance in highly sensitive tiger reserves and protected areas, besides use of drone, unmanned aerial vehicle technology as an airborne monitoring system for better protection and monitoring of wildlife. The plan has specific chapters on management of tourism in wildlife areas as well as on control of poaching and illegal trade in wildlife. Each chapter of the action plan also provides for priority projects with timelines and responsibilities. The plan also considers landscape-based approach of management of wildlife. Human intervention is perhaps the biggest reason for the conflict between man and wildlife. But once the balance between forests and humans is disturbed, both sides suffer, and it becomes important for government as well as individuals to reduce misuse of natural resources. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.